Okay. Okay. So Brandon, we're going for Brandon, or he's going. Okay. Okay. Well, I was in. First of all, I'm glad everybody could be a part. Um, these are all people I went to school with, played with in college. Some still playing, some not still playing, doing their own thing. Nashant and Brad, I was fortunate to um, be in school with them in grad school. We did a leadership program together. Um, Nashant has been with the Oakland Police Department for 20 plus years, 20 plus years.
22 years.
22 years. Currently the captain of the Oakland Police Department, correct?
That's right. I'm the captain. I'm currently assigned to the training division. So in the training division is the academy, in-service training, so the ongoing. And then also under that is, under the training division, they have the policy and publications unit.
Okay, great. And then Brad is in Stockton. He's been with Stockton PD for 14 years and is lieutenant of detectives. I know I might butcher the title.
Yeah, no, that's basically, yeah. So I'm a lieutenant in the investigations division. So I'm in charge of all of our detectives that work kind of major crimes. So like robbery, homicide, and sexual assault, child abuse, burglary, financial crimes, all that kind of stuff. I don't have I don't got the gang units. I don't have the narco units. I got more of the stuff like the more kind of guys that wear suit and ties type.
Okay. So yeah, so I got to do a year and a half of school with them, and both great minds. And basically, when we've been having our conversations surrounding what's been going on over this past month, you know, I thought it would be good to bring some people that are in law enforcement to kind of, you know, share their views and hear our voices and hear, you know, what questions we have, ideas we have that we've been sharing amongst each other. And again, like I know sometimes it can be a tough conversation, especially like given the times right now, but both were on board to having this tough conversation. If it, you know, like both understand that it's necessary and it needs to happen and want to have the conversation to begin with. So, yeah, just brief introduction. Gaddy, how do you want to structure? Do you want to just questions? You want to just jump right into like what, you know, just pick your guys' brains, Brad and Nashant, if you guys want to just share maybe your guys' thoughts on what's going on right now. And then I guess and go from there.
Yeah, that's cool. So
or if anybody has questions like right away.
Well, I mean, I think maybe one thing we could do is maybe Nashant and I could give a little more context as to who we are, because it might help. At least, you know, we're only two people, right? So I mean, certainly we don't represent all cops in America. But at least for me, and I know Nashant really well, just like you do, I think we do have a pretty unique perspective because of kind of who we are and who our family is, and also who our profession is. So it might also be helpful for everybody else on the call to kind of know a little bit about that. And then we can kind of dive into what's going on, you know?
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys can give us more background on you guys as well. And then after that, I feel like, you know, each one of us can all just like kind of introduce ourselves. And if we got any questions for you guys, I mean, I think this call probably will be a lot of just like asking you guys questions and then kind of getting you guys' perspective, because you guys are within that realm and in those fields. So it's like, we're going to be able to get probably a lot of good information from you guys, because you guys are in that stuff. You know what I mean? We're outside looking in, obviously, like, and we're still trying to get all our feelings out about everything, but also trying to like do our part to like head in the right direction. So, but yeah. I agree. I think we should, you know, we want to know you guys more, and then we can kind of just like hop into questions around.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think, at least speaking for me, I want to know you guys as well, you know, because I think that's the best way to have an actual legitimate real conversation, right? Like if you have a conversation with strangers, I don't know how hard, it's kind of hard to have like that deep, hard conversation, So, so with that, I could definitely kick it off. So like Des said, man, I worked for Stockton PD for like 14 years. Before that, I was in the military, in the United States Air Force, and I deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan. I've been married to the same woman for, we've been together almost 15 years. We got 3 kids. I definitely did not grow up wanting to be a cop. Like I grew up, excuse me, I grew up not having an aversion to cops, but it just was not on my radar. Like my family is all in agriculture and farming for the most part. And so that was kind of the direction that I thought I was headed. So I went to school at Chico State, and then the attacks of September 11th happened the first semester of my senior year. So I left school and joined the military because I felt like it was the right thing to do, and I had always kind of thought about joining the military, and I kind of thought like, man, I'm not married, I got no kids, whatever. This is the time to do it. So that's what I did. And then once I got out, after I, deployed and whatnot, sorry, I'm driving, guys. I got a little late start out of the office, but so no disrespect when I'm looking at y'all when I'm talking. When I got out, it was kind of a natural progression to becoming a police officer. I felt like what we did, particularly in Iraq, I saw some major positive changes despite what a lot of the news organizations were putting out there. And I thought, man, I would love to be able to be a part of some positive change when I get home. And I also knew guys that had been in the military and became cops. They're like, man, it's good, like it's very similar as far as kind of the structure of it all, and you'll fit in well. So that's kind of how I became a cop. And then like I said, my oldest son, he's 17, he's an athlete, and he's got questions about all this. And so, I mean, he looks like, I don't actually have any children of my biological children of my own. My oldest son is my wife's son from a previous relationship. He's half Mexican, but he's real light skinned, but nonetheless, he feels like there's a lot of discussion we have had. Right. And then we have 2 babies that are 7 and 4 that we adopted out of foster care. And unfortunately, they don't know nothing about what's going on in the world. But my daughter is half black and half white. And my son, that's my 7-year-old, my 4-year-old is half Mexican and half white. And so again, for me on a personal level, this is very serious and impactful because I worry about what does this mean for them, right? I mean, how do I explain it to them, and what do I say? What don't I say, right? So anyway, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of who I am in the beginning, at least.
All right, right on, Brad. If you guys want, I can jump in and give my my background. If you guys had questions for Brad, I'll pause. All right. Well, then I'll proceed. So I've been with Oakland Police Department for 22 years, as Desmond said. Grew up in Richmond, California. Parents are from India, and so I'm a first generation here in the U.S. Growing up, I remember when I was in preschool, there was a police officer that came. They have those programs where they will come and interact with kids, and the cop that came, he was a motorcycle cop, and I remember I was in preschool, so I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I was really impressed by his uniform and his motorcycle, and I was like, cool, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I think that's what I want to be. So I went home, I told my dad, I said, Dad, I figured out what I want to be when I grow up. And he was like, oh, what do you want to be? I pretty much had it all planned out for you, but okay, let me hear what you got to say. So I told him, I said, I think I want to be a police officer. And he's like, police officer? Absolutely not. He's like, that's not an honorable profession, and people look at cops negatively, and I just don't want you a part of that. I said, okay. So I kind of kept it to myself. My dad was like, you're going to be a doctor. That's the plan. I was like, okay. So went through school. My dad, he had a friend whose son, who was a couple years older than me, he's currently the chief at Martinez PD, but he's an Indian guy. And so when he got hired on as a police officer, or let me back up. so it's kind of a long intro, you guys, but just to kind of give a little bit of background on me. So I was 7 years old. I was I was riding my bicycle through a neighborhood in Richmond, Easter Hill, and got my bike got beat up, got my bike taken, and I was I was like, oh my God, I got my bike taken. And so went home, didn't know who took my bike, but nonetheless, the next day, there was my cousin, that night, my cousin and my dad were like, let's go look for your bike. We're gonna get your bike back tonight. And so we went looking, didn't find the bike. But the next day, my dad was pumping gas. I seen the kid that took my bike, and he was on my bike, and there was a police officer there. And so I said, Dad, that's my bike. That's the kid who took my bike. So my dad flagged down the police officer, said, hey, they go out. I'm in a meeting. Sorry, my son just walked in. So my dad flagged down the police officer and said, hey, my son's bike got taken. That's the bike over there. Go, can you go get it? So anyways, the cop got my bike back, and it kind of like re-sparked a little bit of the interest, but I kept it to myself. Still went down the path of, with the plan of becoming a doctor. And when I was about 19 years old, my dad's friend I told you about, Indian dude, he got hired on as a police officer. And I was like, man, I can do it now. Because the whole time growing up, I never saw an Indian police officer. So I was like, all right, I guess, I just didn't think that's something that I could do, simply just because of that, right? I didn't see people that looked like me that were in the profession. So when he became a police officer, I told my dad, I said, Dad, look, he did it. Is that something, I want to revisit that conversation. Anyway, make a long story short, a couple years later, my dad said, hey, Oakland PD's hiring. My dad worked in Oakland, and he was like, hey, Oakland PD's hiring. Why don't you apply for them? So I applied with them, got hired on, went through the academy, and I've been there ever since. So a little bit about my family. So I'm married. I've been married to my wife for 15 years. We met at Cal State Hayward. We have 2 kids together, and then she has an older son. She has a son from a previous marriage. So I have a stepson. My wife is Black, so we have mixed kids. And so much like Brad, this definitely hits home for me. Actually, the other day, one of my friends, he called and he's like, hey man, I don't know how to can you talk? My friend, he's Black, and he's like, his son is in 10th grade. He goes to St. Joe's. And so my friend's like, hey, can you talk to Kingston and kind of explain to him how to conduct himself, if the police stop him? Because even, I want him to hear, how to really, it's crazy to hear this, but like, this is what I've already had this. It was interesting because I've already had this conversation with my sons, and I've said, hey, listen, when the police stop you, whether they're right or wrong, I'll deal with them later on if they're wrong, but just comply, because I need you. I want you to make it. I want you to survive. And that's just a real conversation. And so definitely hits home, because I know there are cops that can overreact. There are cops that can, I'm in a meeting, please. There are cops that can overreact. And so, just this definitely hits home. And when I saw that video of the Minneapolis incident, I mean, that was definitely the most shocking thing that I've seen, because you're watching this murder happen right in front of your eyes. And I remember before it even like blew up and I saw it, I was telling my wife, who used to be a police officer in Oakland, she left because she wasn't really feeling the good old boys network. And so she left at the middle of her career and said, I'm going to go on and do other things. But nonetheless, I was telling my wife, I said, hey, that like watching him trying to suck in air was like, it actually like haunts me to the, it just bothers me. So like, in the core, watching this guy really suffer. So yeah, I've had a lot of strong emotions about this. And I'm just glad that we're in a position that we can have this conversation. Desmond, I appreciate you organizing this, and to the rest of the people that are on this call, I appreciate the opportunity to allow us to just really open up conversation. And I think we have momentum going in the right direction. I don't want to see the momentum lose. I want to see it continue. And so I think it's these types of partnerships that are really going to get us to keep the momentum going and really affect some change, because it would be for nothing if we don't take this as an opportunity to take us to the next level, is what I'm thinking. So that's a little bit about me.
This is Scott. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you guys for coming on, and Des for setting this up, because it's even just hearing your guys' background, for me, is just because you never know where people are from, and just I think Brad did touch on this point, that it's hard to have that heart-to-heart, that deep conversation with people that you don't really know. So just you guys introducing yourselves and opening up about where you're from and your life, I really appreciate it. We're about to go. I'm with my wife right now. So we've been married a little bit less time than you guys, so only a year. But we have one son, and but we're about to go through an area where we don't have much service, so we'll probably be off the call for about 15 or 20 minutes, but we'll be back on. But before it cut off, I just wanted to say thank you to both you guys, and we'll be back on the call here in a minute. But we're about to lose service here, so thank you guys, and I'll let somebody else continue it from here before I hop back on.
Go ahead, G.
Yeah. What's going on, guys? Kind of going off what Scott said as well. I want to say thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. I feel like it takes a lot of courage just to come on with a call with people you don't even know and just to have these kind of conversations. Yeah, my name is Garrett. I actually went to St. Mary's with Des. I'm from Portland, and I actually used to live in El Cerrito when I was a little guy, which is kind of by Richmond. So, but I did have a question because I was curious about something. We kind of touched on it last week when we were speaking. We talked a little bit about culture. And my question for you guys was, like, how do you navigate if you're in an environment, I mean, I hesitate to say like a locker room environment, but an environment with your coworkers, and you hear something or see something you don't necessarily agree with that kind of goes against what you think you guys are about. Like, how do you deal with that, yet also still have like the camaraderie and team and things like that? Like, just seeing stuff maybe behind the scenes that you may not agree with. Like, how do you navigate that? It's kind of my first.
So, I mean, I can speak to that. And I'm sure, Brad, you can as well. I'm going to jump in on this. So I think early on, when you're young and you first get hired on, I got hired on when I was 21 years old, right? So you're young and impressionable, and you know, we're social creatures, right? We want to fit in. And so, like, I remember, the first couple of times I saw some things that I was like, man, that I went into the business thinking police were a certain way, and then I came to realize that it was that they are that they're human, and that they deal with trauma in a weird way, meaning instead of sitting and really just trying to unpack what you just experienced during your shift, there was a lot of joking, or like weird humor that was made about it. And so as a young kid, I would still call myself, and no disrespect to anyone who's in their early 20s, I was a young kid in my early 20s when I first started at the police department. But I would say, it was probably it was taking that step. I'm going to say it was taking that step. It was right around my mid 20s when I just said, no, I'm going to say something. It starts with a little bit of, I don't really like the way that, I'm not sure that was cool. Right. Or saying, no, I'm not okay with that. Right. And so it's crossing that line. That first time that you cross that line, or actually draw your line. I'm not even gonna say crossing the line. It's the first time you draw that line that is kind of scary, right? Because you're in a social environment. And so when you establish that line and that boundary with what you're okay with and what you're not, it actually becomes a little bit easier. But it's that first time really holding true to your values that kind of makes it. So I'm in my position I'm in now. I feel very comfortable calling stuff like what it is, right? And so I don't have any fears. I don't have any pressures of like, oh, I wonder, are they gonna think that I'm like breaking whatever, the silence or whatever. I'm not. I have zero fears of that, because it's a part of like something that you do on a regular basis. And so I've been faced with situations where it's like, you know, real serious situations where I've like just kind of gone back to, you know, what my value system, you know, holds true to. And so just, it's easier. It's a lot easier now. I don't struggle with making hard decisions. Just the other day, right? I'll be real brief, quick story. There was a discipline recommendation that I had to go put forward, and I went in, the officer did something that I thought was inappropriate. I said, yeah, I recommend 15-day suspension. And like, I remember the whole room looked at it like, was like 15 days. You really, like, that's, and I was like, yeah, like, but it was I didn't feel a sense of, and it was, if I can't give details of what exactly the discipline is about because personnel matter, but I'm certain that all of you, if you heard it, be like, yeah, you're right on track. But I think that it's just, you know, doing it the first time and making it a part of your normal practice that makes it easier.
No.
Brad?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, much along the same lines as Nashant. I mean, I think part of it for me, at least, coming from, like, you got to understand, I got out of the military. I got home from Baghdad, Iraq. I spent 13 months in Baghdad from February of 05 to March of 06. And then I got hired by the police department in June of 06. So I only had a couple of months kind of downtime between that period. And one thing you have to, I don't know if anybody here, you know, knows anybody that's in the military or whatever, but, you know, not to say that racism doesn't exist in the military, because it literally exists, as we know, in every corner of the world. However, everybody in the military gets treated like shit very equally, right? And it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is or whatever else. What my experience was, it's kind of a function of your performance if you get treated better or worse or whatever it is. So going into the police department, that was kind of where my mindset was, as far as like, I just got to perform, because if I perform well, then I'll be rewarded with, you know, a special assignment or whatever it is. So, and also, you know, being a new guy, I knew like, okay, my role is to, and particularly being a little bit older than most of the brand new cops, because I had gone to college and then joined the military and then got hired by the police department. I also knew to just kind of remain a little more quiet when I first began. So for me, it wasn't that hard because, you know, I wasn't really, I kind of stuck to myself. My wife and I were in a very serious relationship, you know, and I can honestly say I have never once in my career heard any cop drop an N-bomb or say anything that I was like, whoa. And, you know, that's like super inappropriate. There, of course, have been times where I'm like, that's not cool. And just like Nashant, I think Nashant captured it perfectly. You have to, I think each of us, not just cop or not, each human being has to have that courage to say, you know what, this is what I'm cool with. And if we're going to communicate, this is the way that I'm going to communicate with you. And this is the level of respect that I will, you know, I will display towards you. And I expect that same thing in return. And once those lines are clear, it is easy. And particularly now, also like Nashant, being in a position, I've been in a position of influence within my agency for a long time. And so it even makes it easier. And especially in today's age, it's probably the easiest time, I would argue, to make it clear, because, you know, the eyes of the world are on law enforcement in America, right? And so as a leader within my organization, I recognize the importance of me setting the tone for my section. I have, you know, I got almost 100 guys and gals that I'm responsible for. And so if I don't very clearly communicate what is acceptable culture and what is acceptable communication and the way that everybody should behave, then I have failed, and they're going to do something that, you know, that reflects poorly on our agency. So I work really hard, and it, you know, I mean, it's just a matter of setting those expectations early and often, and making it clear what's okay and what's not. I mean, I don't want to sound like, you know, I hope that doesn't sound like we're trying to dodge the question, because I recognize the question was more narrow and focused. And I guess to get back to the question around the locker room, like, the reality for me is, man, people, if somebody was going to try to say something that anybody thought was inappropriate, they would know not to say it around anybody of rank in my agency, because it will not fly, and they will get, I mean, it's going to be handled swiftly and immediately. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Can I just add one more thing that you just triggered a thought on? I think also being balanced too, right? And it's not always being a disciplinarian. It's really just being balanced. So when people are doing what's expected or going above and beyond, I think recognizing when somebody gets it right, like, hey, good job, celebrating that. And then also when somebody gets it wrong, holding them accountable, because then I think you maintain credibility where people,
100%.
they view you as you know, your intentions are legitimate.
And the last piece of that also is being real with your real values, right? You can't say, oh, I'm not just a company man. I'm not just whatever. Like, be real with people, right? Because everybody, it doesn't matter your level of education or not. People are smart, and people know when you're bullshitting them, right? And people can see through you if you're being insincere. So that's the other piece I would offer is, you know, to as far as being balanced, is also just being real.
That is, yeah, you guys are really giving definitely some good answers. Some that I didn't expect. But one thing that and first of all, I appreciate you guys being on the call. The one thing that I was thinking about while you guys were speaking, I think, and I don't know if everybody's thinking the same thing, but one thing that I could tell that's different from you guys is obviously like the way you're.
Hey, I'm on a call, babe.
The way you're speaking.
Sorry about that.
But the thing that I see is that both of you guys in your family, and especially where you guys are from. So you guys are from the hood pretty much. You guys are from Richmond, Stockton, and you grew up around Black people. You understand that culture. What do y'all like? How do y'all feel when there's police officers that's coming from certain areas and then they're not exposed to that culture? And they come in and they don't understand what's going on. So Nashant, Brad, you guys might be on a certain, you guys might be on the beat, which obviously you're a detective now, but you might be on beat and somebody's getting rowdy. For you guys, y'all understand it and you guys know how to approach it and to get it under control. But for somebody who's not from that world or understand that, you know, Black people can act like that or what it is and what it really means. Now they might be scared for themselves. They might approach it a different way. How do you guys approach that and help the people that don't understand it? Because obviously, Nashant, you have a Black wife. You have mixed race kids. You grew up around Black people. Pretty sure Brad is the same way, growing up in the area that you did. So I think that's where the disconnect is, because I feel like a lot of these cops that are killing these young Black kids, and obviously there's killings of all races every year. But it seems like the media only portrays in the worst ways the Black ones, and that's the ones that they're getting hold of. So what do y'all say to the people who don't understand Black culture and who go into these situations with premeditated thoughts about what's going to happen to them just because of how they see Black people? What do you guys say to that?
So Brad, can I jump in on this? Because I think you're onto something. That's for real. When people don't, it's the unknown that people are naturally conditioned to fear, right? And so before I went to the training division, I was an area commander. And basically what that means is Oakland's broken up into 5 areas, right? Each area is like a little city. So I was responsible for 100,000 residents. I had basically like a small police department under me, and we were out in East Oakland, right? And so what I realized is that I was in that assignment for 4 years, and we started to do this. We recognized that 74% of our calls for service went to 3 beats, and most of the violence was there. Most of like the high stress calls for service were there. Most of the calls for service were in these particular areas. So cops were ending up going to these 3 particular beats on a regular basis when there was trauma going on. People weren't calling when, you know, hey, you know, we got food here, or we got barbecue, or we're gonna watch the game. It was none of that. And so I think what that does is that conditions police officers to think every time I'm going, like as soon as that radio calls your call sign means it's almost like your name, but it's like 1 Adam 27. That's your identifier. When they call that, it almost gives you like a little, not to me, but I would imagine that it gives to an officer who's constantly going to the same neighborhood. They hear the same address or they hear the same neighborhood that they're going to, and they have a reaction to where they're going in highly vigilant. And now somebody goes to reach for their wallet and they're overreacting, right? Because you pull up on the scene and somebody reaches for their wallet to properly identify themselves and the cop overreacts. So how do you overcome that? Well, recognizing that they're spending most of their time going to emergency situations and dealing with trauma, the way we started to counterbalance that is I said, I want us to do the exact same. I want us to have a presence at these same 3 beats, but in a non-enforcement capacity. So what I would do is I'd actually let my officers go off service, not wear their uniforms, like plan it the day before, go to a particular neighborhood or a park or go shoot hoop, go throw a football around, go to the movies. We would get tickets to like some of the A's games and send the cops on duty so that they're interacting. You're having like a real interactive engagement with somebody that's from that neighborhood. Now you have a different perspective. It's almost opening up your perspective when you're saying, well, every time I go to this neighborhood, it's not just trauma that's going on. I actually know so-and-so that lives in the neighborhood, and his uncle is the pastor at Acts Full Gospel, or he's got a family member that owns that store down there. I could stop by the store. It's just really getting back to, not just responding during times of emergencies, really setting aside the equivalent amount of time, or at least close to the equivalent amount of times. And we were able to do that because we have 2 squads that are on. So instead of having the overlap, I would take the overlapping squad and take them offline. Don't wear your uniforms today. Or if you're going to wear uniforms, go walk the beat. I don't want you to answer not one call for service. I want you to go out to do homework with students. So I opened up a substation in my area, and we built out a substation, and I said we could have kids and police officers meet there and do homework after school. So just really having that type of interaction, I think, takes away from the unknown or the preconceived notion that people are going into these calls with. So I think it's making sure, recognizing, and then so we also have systems in place that we count everything. So how do you manage what you don't measure, right? And so we count like when they get rudeness complaints, or they have force incidents, or they're using sick leave. We've identified 18 different performance dimensions that are associated with risk. And so if I see this one police officer, and I get these reports regularly that say, hey, this officer's gotten 3 complaints for rudeness, that makes me tell the lieutenant, hey, lieutenant, find out from the sergeant, find out from the senior officer in the squad, or the officer, him or herself, why are you getting all these complaints? Why are you being rude? What's going on in your life? Are you, sometimes people are going through things at home and it carries over, or they might have a substance issue like alcohol problem and things like that. So they're underlying issues. Or are you having a conversation to understand how is this person seeing our community members? Or are they referring to them negatively? And then are they becoming jaded? Are they becoming disrespectful? And so the first time, my first goal is like, hey, let's turn this ship, right? Because we can save somebody at this point. But when they don't embrace being saved, I think then it escalates. But I always want to start off by trying to help somebody, see it the way that they could, because it's a huge investment in a police officer when, and so you hate to see them not make it, but if they're not good for business, they got to go. And so I'll turn it to you, Brad.
Yeah. So I think for me, my assignment right before I went to investigations to run that area, I was in charge of hiring for the police department. And that was a couple of years ago. And, one of the things that we put a tremendous amount of effort into was being very proactive in hiring local candidates, right? This is before, now every police department everywhere is hiring, but we were one of the few departments some years ago that was hiring because everybody else was still dealing with budget stuff, whatever. And so we recognized that we had an opportunity, because your point is well made, right? Not everybody understands Stockton. Stockton is a pretty unique place, if you don't know about it. I mean, and it's like Oakland, we have some areas that are nice, but for the most part, we have some real challenges, right? And Stockton is literally, it was just announced a few months ago that we're the most diverse city in America. And so we talked about, hey, we recognize the importance of having police officers that are representative of the community that we're serving. And we've always talked about this, it's kind of been a tagline for years and years and years, but how do we operationalize that? What do we really do? How do we get into these neighborhoods that are plagued by violent crime, that are just riddled with issues, how do we get into those neighborhoods and make them, the people that actually live there, trust us enough to want to be us, right? Because if you can't do that, then those neighborhoods, there's always going to be a disconnect between certain neighborhoods and certain police departments. So not only was there a huge hiring push to hire individuals that are representative of our community and from our community, actually local candidates, but at the same time, we did exactly what Nashant talked about. We set up a whole section, a brand new section of the department called Strategic Enforcement Office.